And so we want to think about this in terms of the ABC methodology. And we talked about very early on, this idea of ABC. And we remember that when we translate that, what that means is that the accounting system equals the baseline system plus the customization, plus customizations to that. And so when we're developing the system, right, there are certain ways that we then need to think about developing that with respect to the baseline system and the customizations. And this just reiterates what we talked about earlier, right? The accounting system consists of a baseline system that is typically purchased, and we leverage as much functionality out of the baseline system as possible, even if that means that we have to tweak and change some of our business processes. But we want to be able to, we want to customize as little as necessary because of the complications that and complexities that result from customization. And so we want to leverage baseline functionality as much as possible. Then we customize the remaining functionality to meet our individual and unique needs. And it's this baseline plus customizations that consists of our accounting system. And so this should look familiar to you as well. We said that, remember then that the three functions of the accounting system are to store accounting data, and that's in our relational database. We analyze accounting data, and that's through either end-user computing or business intelligence analytics. And we talked about the different ways for business intelligence analytics, right, with shadow data or third-party software. And we talked about who maintains control generally of one or the other of those two decisions about business intelligence, and I hope you all remember all of that. And then we also have to do all of that. We have to store it and analyze it within a framework of security and controls so that we're safeguarding the accounting data. And so all of this at this point, I hope, is good review for you. If it's not, you might go back into your text and kind of identify those chapters that talk about these different components, and just do a quick review of those. And we talked that to develop an accounting system, we really have these three keys that we have to consider. And one is the people, right? Because we absolutely must take into account the people. What are our business processes, and then what technology is available to us? And the intersection of all three of those items, obviously, we want to leverage all three of those items in this intersection of where we identify the accounting system. And this just gives us a little bit of a feel for the types of people. So we talk about people, processes, and technology. Well, when we're talking people, who are they? And we're talking systems analysts, which may be you all, right? You all may be a systems analyst. We're talking about database designers, database developers, application developers, and network specialists. And generally, when we're talking all the other four, we're talking more IT, technology-focused staff, and not as much accounting staff. Still, we still have to take into account that we have these resources that we need to include in our development, accounting system development. And so when we're talking processes, we need to think in terms of system development life cycle, and that's a series of phases to create the system. And those phases include the planning phase, the analysis phase, the design, the build, the install, and the deploy phases. And we'll talk about each of those a little bit further. But the way to think about this is that every system has a life cycle. And plan, analyze, design, build, install, and deploy is one way of identifying a life cycle for a system. And then we have the system development methodology. And so there we're talking about, well, what is the order and timing that we're going to execute the system development life cycle in? And so we'll talk about ideas like waterfall and prototyping and these different system development methodologies. And then we talk about, technology, right? So we talked about people, we talked about processes, and now we talk about the technology side of it. And when we're talking about technology, we're talking about things like accounting software, the database and the database management system, our networks and protocols. Are we laptop based? Are we desktop based? Are we mobile phone based? There are different types of hardware concerns. And then we also can't ignore, as we talked about earlier, this idea of cybersecurity and the increasingly difficult need to have technology, process, policies, and procedures that are aimed at safeguarding our information assets. And so we talk about this SDLC, we can see that it typically consists of these 6 phases: the planning phase, analysis or analyze, the design, the build or buy, the install, and the deploy. And this table just gives us a little bit of a description of each of those different phases. So when we're planning, we're identifying the need or the opportunity that the new system would address. So what's wrong with what we've got now? Why is it not working? Right? And then how imminent a need is there for us to have a new system? Then when we talk about analyze, we're looking at, well, what do we have now? What do we like about it? What do we not like about it? How could it be made better? What does our business model and our entity needs say or suggest that we need as far as the accounting system goes? And then based on the analysis, we then design the system, right? So that design may include the software or operational design side or the hardware design side. And then we have to make a decision whether we're going to build it ourselves, that is internally, either internally develop the software and write the code so that we create an accounting system, or do we outsource that to an external third party, or do we just buy the system off the shelf? And increasingly now, most companies, because these systems have become so robust, most companies are just buying these systems off the shelf. Once we've made that decision, we then need to install it, right? Which also includes this idea of training users and data conversion, which are big deals and often very complicated and involved. And how are we going to handle legacy systems? How are we going to handle legacy data? How are we going to access that? Are we going to convert it? How do files out of our old system convert to files into the new system? Is there a field for each field, or do we have to somehow create multiple different fields? So it can become a very complex discussion. And then we have to deploy the system. And so by deploying it, we mean we have to really operate the new system. So that means continuing to support the system and continuing to support the users. And then we start our life cycle over again, right? So once we've deployed it, we're tracking problems. We're growing as an organization. Our industry is growing, or we're not growing. We're shrinking. But all of those require that we constantly revisit our system and go through this planning process again. And so you can see that it's just the software development life cycle is an iterative process. So then we talk about the system development methodology, and so how do we go about executing or adhering to the software development lifecycle? And so what we say is the software development lifecycle specifies what steps there are to complete. The software development or system development methodology, and I'm sorry, I said it's system development lifecycle and system development methodology specifies when the steps are needed. So one tells us what steps to complete, and that's the system development life cycle, and one tells us when the steps are completed, and that's the system development methodology. And while there are multiple examples of this, or different ways of doing it, predominantly we see that these system development methodologies would go about either a waterfall methodology, a prototyping methodology, or an ABC methodology. And we'll talk about each of those a little bit further. And so you see here with the waterfall methodology, we're really performing each of these steps sequentially, one after the other. So we go through the planning phase. We then analyze, go through the analysis phase. And then based on the output of that, we go through the design phase. And then once we design the system, we go through this decision process about build and buy. And then once we're finished with that, we go through a wholesale installation of the system. So it's sort of a Big Bang theory all at once, right? And then after we've installed it, we move to the deployment phase, and then generally concurrent with deployment, we're also beginning the planning phase again, so that we talked about this earlier. How are we changing as an organization, and do there need to be changes in our system to address those changes, while we're continuing to support the current system and the current system user needs. The prototyping phase is a little bit different. You can see we have the same steps, right? There's still these same, we still have the same 6 steps, but so we plan, we analyze, we design a prototype, right? Which is really just a mock-up of how we see the system working. We build the prototype, and then we have users come in and test the prototype. And if the prototype meets our needs, we move on to the installation. If it doesn't, we get there, we take their feedback, and we go back to the analysis phase. We tweak the design, or we tweak the prototype further. We build the prototype. We have users come in and test that. Have we addressed all of their needs? So it becomes, this prototyping methodology becomes an iterative process between the analyze and the build phases. And we see this generally being necessary, not for whole systems, but for modules of systems where there are very, very unique, complex reporting requirements or other unique, very complex user needs. But again, it just becomes an iterative process by prototyping, and then at that time we move on to the install and deploy phases. And then the last methodology we'll talk about is this ABC methodology. And as you recall, so ABC is the accounting system equal baseline plus customizations. And when we're talking about this ABC methodology, what we're really saying is that we're going to divide the system into 2 phases. One is the baseline phase, and one is the customized phase. And in the baseline phase, we're really going to follow that waterfall methodology. We're going to plan, analyze, design, and then decide to build or buy. Then we have to address the customizations that are needed. And in the customizations, we're going to follow the same 6 steps. We're just going to apply a prototyping methodology to the customization phase, or customization functions, where we plan, analyze, design a prototype, build a prototype, test it by having users come in and literally try to break it, take their input, reanalyze, redesign, rebuild, and continue with that until we've met their needs. Then we will install and deploy both the baseline and the customized systems. So you can see that the waterfall and prototyping each have a place in the ABC methodology. And in general, this insight is true, that the methodology, the ABC methodology, is used a lot today, where we have, the baseline system, and then we have the customization of it, and we don't have wholesale accounting systems implemented using either solely the waterfall or the prototyping. Particularly as we get into much, much larger, more complex organizations. And so again, this is just meant to remind us, and this should be a very familiar picture to you now, in that the baseline accounting system includes this out-of-the-box functionality with respect to vendors, banking, financial reporting, and that we're able to leverage across multiple business cycles this out-of-the-box functionality. And that is what we implement and execute to where our processes and procedures only have the requirements, and the baseline functionality meets those simpler requirements. And this is just meant to really provide us with a visual illustration of a way of looking at this model, where we talk about, well, after a problem analysis, we collect the current system models, and we include all of these functional areas that are necessary. We then compare these database models to the business processes, so that we're able to kind of visually explain what the model is, and then we relate these processes to the people. So again, we look at this and we say, okay, well, we have the technology, the people, and the processes that are inherent to our system development cycle. And so finally, this is just meant to kind of expand on this idea of the ABC methodology, and it gives a little more concrete definition to the different system development life cycle steps that we talked about earlier. So for instance, with respect to planning, we evaluate a new accounting system project requirements, and we initiate the new project. Obviously, we have to go through and think about, well, who are the stakeholders? We have to get their buy-in. We have to identify their needs. Then we go through this analysis phase where we analyze our current system. We identify gaps using gap analysis, right? We understand what it is that works for current users and what it is that they need, or where it is that they need improvement. We then design a new system with that in mind. And so you can see this just gives us a lot more detailed sort of ways to think about each of the steps in that implementation methodology. And so this concludes Chapter 13. Again, please go back and read the chapter. And this is an important chapter because it really does deal with the implementation and execution of a system. And so understand each of the steps and understand some of the details. Understand the implementation methodologies and the difference between waterfall prototyping and ABC methodology, and think some about too when you can think based on your experiences one of those methods might be better than another. And then if you would please complete the learning exercises, and I appreciate your time and attention today. Thank you.